WV Uncommonplace. This podcast is a variety podcast that houses numerous series to cover mental health, empowerment, podcast framework, and various intimate theories to get to know the hosts. Along with occasional movies reviews and dives in pop culture with our event podcast episodes. The Uncommonplace digs into bringing guests on that stories don't fit the mold and are very different. WV stands for the great state of West Virginia, and every quarter we cover something in West Virginia. Stacey and myself, JR, are your hosts, so please come along for this venture to Uncommonplace.
Howdy, this is JR from West Virginia and Commonplace, and today I'm doing something a little different here. This episode you're about to hear, this is coming from Valerie Hall. She is a friend, a colleague, an acquaintance, a fellow podcaster, someone inside of podcasting that understands the value of taking in as much information as you can and molding and shaping that information to help you within your own podcast. I wish there were more like-minded people like her inside podcasting, because truly inside podcasting you always have to be a student of the game and absorb things, and you can be an enthusiast or an expert in certain expertise, but you never go away from the one idea that you can always keep learning. And Valerie Hall is exemplary in that area, in the way that she shares and cares across social media and just in general to the whole podcasting community. I want to take a moment and give her flowers. And her and I were talking behind the scenes like we do all the time. And conceptually, she came up with these episodes after we were talking about like a little exercise to do while you're podcasting, just to keep you fresh and going. So if you don't mind, I'm going to play these excerpts on West Virginia and Commonplace. And definitely please do me a huge favor, head over to whatever podcasting app you use and listen to Wealth, Yoga, and Wine podcast by Valerie Hall. It's a very quaint, quick, and concise podcast. She delivers a great message, but she gets straight to the point. So it's something there that you definitely could get involved with, and definitely will find good wealth, definitely great yoga, and some good inserts about wine. Secondly, last thing I want to do before I jump off here and we head into this is this right here. The amazing thing with her and other podcasters that are similar to her, the sharing and the actual camaraderie with other podcasters, not thinking you're bigger and badder or greater than anyone else, is something that I had to take from her, and I never thought I was better than anybody else, but just being humble inside certain situations and different things like that. So with that being said, go ahead and listen and let me know what you think. In the show notes, you'll be able to find out how to get in touch with her, how to get aligned with everything that goes on with Wealth, Yoga, and Wine podcast by Valerie Hall. I'm JR, and I'm signing off.
Why would you possibly listen to such an eclectic podcast, Wealth, Yoga, Wine? The main reason is because I have about 70 some odd years of experience that gets condensed into 10 minutes. Therefore, you benefit in getting snippets on how to take action steps that improve your life. And it can be in love and relationships. You can see improvement in your vocation. You can see improvement in your health and fitness, because I make a segue into every topic, which is very unusual. But then again, I'm a bit eclectic. Whether you're looking to improve your thinking process, improving your yoga practice, or improving your food and wine pairing, I can help you with all of that on a weekly basis. And here's the really cool thing. It's not just me who has all this information. This is 70 years of experience working with people like Bob Proctor, Mary Morrissey, my Kundalini Yoga teacher, and being in the food and wine industry for 20 years. That's an amazing reason to listen to my podcast, Wealth, Yoga, Wine, that benefits you. I don't listen to other people's podcasts. The reason being, they ramble too much. I treat my podcast as though it's a professional speech. I did a lot of public speaking on a professional level for about 30 years. Therefore, my podcast has an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. And that's one of the reasons I can do segue from mindset to yoga to food and wine pairing. Therefore, when you do listen to my podcast, it's only about 10 minutes. And I learned this from Instagram teachers that listeners only have about 3 seconds of attention. So I got to get your attention in the first 3 seconds. Therefore, my goal is to entertain and inform and help you take action steps to meet your goals, your dreams, your wishes within 10 minutes. How do you get life's lessons in less than 10 minutes from a podcast called Wealth, Yoga, Wine? The whole idea of this podcast is to help people improve their mindset, improve their thoughts. The podcast came about during the lockdown of the pandemic of 2020. I basically lost everything. I lost my French wine career of 26 years. My lovely small luxury inn, the Petit Chateau, was closed down because of the pandemic. And my mentor said to me, Valerie, what do you already have? What are your assets? I knew a lot about mindset because I'd been studying with Ray Morrissey and Bob Proctor, Price Pritchett. Well, that's what wealth is about. It's about a mindset. It's not about your bank account. Kundalini Yoga, the yoga section, came about because I have been studying Kundalini Yoga for over 30 years every day, even when I was traveling in France and Spain and Italy, every day. Lastly, wine, of course. I didn't want to give up all my 26 years knowledge of fine wine. I always include food and wine pairings. It's a fun podcast. Less than 10 minutes, you're going to have some tips and techniques for action steps that will improve your life. Merci, et revoir. Let me clarify that last statement that I don't listen to podcasts. I did not listen to any podcast when I was teaching myself podcasting, which took me a year and a half, by the way, but we were in the pandemic lockdown, so I had time. I now listen to J.R. Sparrow. I only listen to 2 people, J.R. Sparrow and Julie Hood with Course Creators, because both of these people have taught me so much in the world of podcasting. For JR, but also with Julie Hood because I do online public speaking courses now. Julie Hood with Course Creators, really, really good podcast. JR is hilarious, but very informational. Definitely want to listen to him. And if you're looking to do an online course, well, think about it. So I only listen to 2 podcasts now, but I did not listen to any podcast when I was teaching myself podcasting. I don't interview people, largely because I want to talk about what I want to talk about. As I mentioned, I treat this as a presentation. When you have someone you're interviewing, there's no way you can really control that conversation so that it fits within, let's say, a 3-minute slot, because I try to devote 3 minutes to wealth and then 3 minutes to yoga and 3 minutes to food and wine pairing. And remember, wealth is a mindset. It has nothing to do with the bank or financial planning. Therefore, because I don't interview people, I tell stories about people, about companies, maybe about things that happened to me. But I research the topics also, which every segment has a specific link. So you can go to my podcast details and you can check out more information about what I was talking about. And that is what's really cool about my podcast. The next topic, yoga. It's specifically Kundalini Yoga. I am a snob when it comes to yoga. I have only studied Kundalini Yoga for 30 years, every day without fail. When I had to travel to Europe for my wine career, if I had to find a small bathroom in order to do 3 minutes of breath of fire, that's what I would do. Again, in that segment, there is going to be a link to a Kriya, exercise, however you want to look at it, that will help you. There's a Kriya that helps you with anger. You will never be angry again. I'm not joking. Anger is not even in my vocabulary. I don't have it as an emotion unless something really, really, really bad happens. That's what's really cool about each of the segments is that they're very specific to the topic, and there's always a segue. Wine, as the last topic on my podcast, is actually the funnest. Again, I try to guide people. I try to help them because there is a lot of what we call swill on the market. And I tell people, if you see a 25-case pile in a wine store, don't buy it because they probably bought it on sale and it's probably way past expiration date or the vintage date. But largely I talk about food and wine pairing because my background is very eclectic. I was born in Japan, raised in Texas, lived in New York, but I'm a Francophile and I was married to a Frenchman. Therefore, the food and wine pairing I do is something akin to guacamole and a beautiful Bordeaux Blanc. Burgundies with black bean salsa. Oh, I'm also a vegetarian. When I was married to the Frenchman, he always wanted to know, Bibi, what is the recipe for your black bean salsa? I generally research my topics for a couple of days. I would say I probably spend 9 to 10 hours researching because it's broken up between 3 days. I decide the topic first. Wealth is probably the most difficult because I specifically look for people who are altruistic in their mission in life or their company is altruistic with its mission, which leads me to monetizing in the next couple of blips. Because I do monetize, I'm really strict about with whom I monetize. Wealth is probably the trickiest because I search out and research people whom I want to highlight, who I want to feature, and then hopefully get them to come on board as a sponsor. So wealth takes a little bit of research. Here's an example of how I approached someone whom I already knew, Dolphin Landings. I worked there, but it's a very interesting sailboat charter company because not only does he have an amazing history as a sailor who built his own boats. It's right here in St. Petersburg, so I know him. Plus, as I mentioned, I worked with him. But they also have this amazing nonprofit called Soothe Our Souls, which has a great mission. They basically take people out once a month who have either mental or physical disabilities for free because Dan realized that people who have incapacities like this need to get out on the water. And I'm a sailor. I totally agree with him. I did monetize his being featured on my podcast for basically nothing because I first started out. I'm rethinking that whole process and probably going to up my fee, but that's the kind of person I want to be on my podcast that I feature. People always talk about content. Because I'm so focused on those 3 subjects, wealth, yoga, wine, I have plenty of content. Plus, I have 75 years of knowledge in those 3 subjects. With yoga, I have always studied Kundalini Yoga. I am a yoga snob. I know absolutely nothing about the others. Therefore, on my Kundalini Yoga segment of each episode, I will refer to a specific Kriya, an exercise that ties into the issue of the person or the company I'm talking about under wealth. Therefore, it's always a segue from my first topic to my second topic. I always have links. I always share with how a specific Kriya helped me. I let people know what is the benefit of doing the specific Kriya and the fact you can change your life by doing a Kriya for 3 minutes every morning. Wine is the broadest subject in my podcast because I generally focus on food and wine pairing. However, because there's so much information, after 26 years of being in the industry, I sometimes digress. I will talk about trends in the industry. I will talk about industry newsletters. I will talk about things that irritate me about the industry. Wines that people should not drink, wines that people should drink. And believe it or not, there's a segue between wealth and yoga into wine. Largely, I will talk about the good companies, the good importers, vineyards which are making a difference in the world as far as being sustainable, being vegan friendly, things of that sort. Therefore, while wine is broad, it's also very focused on improving the world. How do I monetize? This is the trickiest part of my podcast, and I have succeeded with it in the past, but I've stopped. The people, the company in the wealth section, as I mentioned before, have to be a company or a person which is altruistic practices. There are several that I have in line now. It takes a little longer to do what I do as far as monetizing because there's not, what do you call it, pre-roll, mid-roll, and exit roll. I don't know the terms, but I don't want to do that. I don't want people listening to my podcast and I interrupt it to give this important whatever commercial. I don't want to do that. I don't ever want to sound like I'm giving a commercial. Therefore, it takes a lot more work in what I'm doing, and I'm going to stay with it. And after a while, these companies are going to start calling me. Again, with the altruistic company, I do my research. I have quite a few that I am interested in, so that's what I'm working on right now with my podcast. I would point out that advertising for podcasts, when you reach out the way I am, reach out to people you already know and explain to them there are really good statistics on podcasting reach, like how many people you're going to reach with your weekly or daily podcast. Podcasting advertising is so new to people. I do believe it's going to take a lot of repetition to show the benefit. When I do have people who are supporting my podcast through monetization, I also go to the extent of doing Instagram posts for them, doing LinkedIn posts. So I go above and beyond your typical marketing of my podcast. I will do other kind of marketing for them that rolls into my podcast. That's why I know I need to increase my rates. Because I do market on different avenues such as Instagram and LinkedIn, they're different audiences. Instagram, you have to be, it seems like to me, really creative, really jazzy and snappy. Therefore, I use Headliner. JR guided me toward that. But I'll also take travel photos because travel photos seem to be really popular with the Instagram crowd. I'll take Headliner and I'll put the blurb from the audiogram that they create. Instead of using my Headliner, I'll use a really pretty photograph from somewhere I've traveled. And you can use the same podcast I do because it's wealth, it's yoga, it's wine. So I can really be aggressive in my marketing with my podcast because I have those three subjects. For instance, I did a podcast in the first segment, Wealth, was about relationships. And it was titled 10 Steps That We All Make on That First Date. I had really beautiful photograph of all these steps leading up to the villa we were staying at in Italy. And I put that on the photograph and it led into the podcast details. That got 100 and some odd views on Instagram, which I have never hit with my podcast postings. Therefore, be creative. Take like the hottest topic or the hottest point in your podcast do a photo of some sort, and that catches people's attention. It seems as though when you're marketing your podcast, people like to see your face. I will always do just audio. However, I have learned that you can introduce your podcast by making a really short video of a very short video of yourself talking about your podcast. That is another great way to market your podcast. I believe with marketing your podcast, this is how you get it monetized, because you can prove to people, this is how many people I reached with Libsyn, the hosting company I use. Their statistics are really good, really simple. It breaks it down by country. LinkedIn does something that will break down your statistics by demographics. That's what you want more than anything. When you're monetizing, you need good statistics. Let's get technical, which is so beyond me. And that's where JR helps me also. This is not a commercial for JR. The guy has helped me so much in my 3 years of podcasting. Speaking of which, hosting company is super important. And I did tons of research before I even began podcasting. That's why it took me a year and a half. Dave Jackson is a really good expert on which hosting company you want. I do use Libsyn. I love their statistics. I love their support. I drove them crazy at the beginning of my podcasting. They never hear from me now, except I want to start another little project for seniors. The important thing about hosting your podcast is how much support you are going to get, and the statistics and the ease of using their product. So those three things: your statistics, their support, and the ease of using their program. One caution when you're researching which hosting company: don't go with the free. You get what you pay for. I strongly suggest the big ones out there. There is an easy way to research them. Dave Jackson actually has something on YouTube, and it's a free class on how to choose a hosting company. I know many times we are enticed by that word free. However, read the fine print. Anchor, which is no longer around, think of all the people who started podcasting on Anchor, and Anchor is no longer around. The other thing about some of these companies, they will change your podcast verbiage. They'll change your text. Be very careful with which hosting company you choose to put your podcast, because once again, Anchor's no longer here. So that's a pain. Industry research on podcasting. There's some really cool email newsletters. Podcast News is one of them. Really tells you a lot about the industry. You can get a job as a podcaster, as an editor or something. But look at Podcast News. Free, really cool. Go to the podcast conferences. Several of them are really informational. You'll meet really good people. You will learn so much. I actually started out as a volunteer at PodFest in Orlando, and now I speak at least twice a year with them. There's also podcasting subchapters or chapters where you can go. I know PodFest has their own, for instance, in each city they have meetings of podcasters. Now, that's another way to learn about podcasting. Changes I'd like to make after 3 years of podcasting. This November was when I started, but I was still researching and playing around. Changes I would like to make is engagement. I haven't learned the secret of engagement. I don't know, this is going to sound strange. I don't know if it's because I'm a woman and people don't want to hurt my feelings, but I say this because on LinkedIn, good friends on LinkedIn, because he lives in Japan, with another gentleman who does interviews. He does a podcast. His podcast for me is way too long. I don't like to interview people, but he has great subjects, and we kind of cross over the same path sometimes. But people always engage with him. Nobody engages with me. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? That is something I'm going to focus on the next coming, let's just say the next coming year, is engagement. One thing I have changed immediately, and that's based on JR again, is listening to Spotify on how to increase your audience, how to make it into a community. One thing I learned is the common thread I have throughout my podcast, it's a mindset. The wealth is a mindset. The yoga is a mindset. Even fine wine and food pairing is a mindset. I have changed every title now begins with the mindset of. For instance, I just did a podcast called The Mindset of Change. I just did a podcast that's called The Mindset of Try Something Different. Again, all this information comes from my research with people I've studied, Price Pritchett, Mary Morrissey. I'm just going to experiment with starting everything that says the mindset of. Another change that I made it this summer, and I introduced it with the wording, changing things up for a summer attitude. And I put a picture of the sailboat that I sail on with my best friend, my best sailing friend. That's what I put on, like the advertisement, like the new things are coming. And it was fun. Again, it got a lot of, I just explained in the post that because there's so many things in summer that I love baseball. I don't really watch it, but I go on YouTube and I find the blurbs. Again, it was a big hit. And I think people were looking for a change of my podcast, for me to do something different. Therefore, I'm going to stick with that every season. I'm going to make it seasonal. And that's one of the big changes I think will work for me. Additionally, I will do a series. For instance, from studying with Mary Morrissey for so long, she points out that there's 4 quadrants in our life that make up a successful life. Love and relationships, vocation, health and fitness. There's another one, finance. Something about money, I think, which I never talk about. But there's 4 quadrants. So I will take a series and do one every month or mix it up. The relationships I did over summer, and that was the most popular. That's the one that said 10 mistakes we all make on the first date. I explained when I was changing things up on my podcast for that summer attitude, I told people what I was going to talk about. That I was going to talk about romance. I was going to talk about swimming and baseball. So they were prepared, and that's what I'm going to do for fall. I'm not going to talk about football, however. I don't like football. Therefore, have a plan. I know every week, I know months ahead what I'm going to talk about. There were a couple of times where I was a little lost. I didn't even know until the day before what I was going to talk about. Because remember, I treat podcasting like it's a speech. I have an introduction, I have the body, and I have a conclusion. It's important to be prepared. I listen to not very many podcasts, and the people who do the interviews many times I think are the worst because there's no rhyme or reason. I just listen to the person who's doing my podcast, my website, and it was like a bromance between him and the person he was interviewing. 5 minutes in, I got absolutely no information. What you want to do is immediately give valuable information. It's the hook. It's just like Instagram, 3 seconds. Back to engagement. Some of the ideas I have. A blog. I've been told many times I should make a blog from my podcast details and all the links. All right, so I'm going to work on that. The other concept is I thought I would do maybe kind of a giveaway that's not free. Price Pritchett's book, YouTube Square, doesn't cost that much money, but maybe, I don't know, I'm thinking of some kind of goofy contest. You guys let me know. Who's ever listening to this, let me know. Give me your idea for engagement, because I'm lost in the weeds about this. Then I also thought, yes, so the bonuses, if you're the 100th listener today or whatever, I have a really cool Price Pritchett book for you or something. But as I mentioned, I'm working on engagement. I have a few ideas for engagement. I'm just stuck. It's the only place I'm stuck in podcasting. I also want to reiterate about equipment. If you go, or when you go to the conferences and when you're doing your research, if you're doing podcasting, don't get caught up in expensive equipment. I literally record on my laptop, my Mac Air. I still haven't gotten a microphone. Jared's going to kill me because I really am truly recovering from the pandemic. There's just issues that call for my money before a microphone, but it's happening this month. Don't get caught up in expensive equipment. You more than likely, I'm doing all these on my phone without a microphone. Sorry, JR. But you can start really, really simple. I started on my iPad. Again, it really comes down to learning editing as far as Ophonic or another company. So don't get caught up. Look at free before you buy something. Speaking of free, when it comes to equipment or maybe applications like Ophonic that can help you with your editing, when you are monetizing your podcast, what I like to do, I will do 1 or 2 free segments. For instance, I love this industry newsletter called 750. They would go into my wine episode. I have done a 3-minute blurb for them a few times, talking about some of the articles that they cover. This is an industry newsletter. However, it's non-geeky. They have really great information for your everyday consumer to learn more about spirits, learn more about wine, fine wines. And I send it off to them, and it has been successful in me actually getting their business. You can do something free and still get business. Collaboration with other podcasters. Be very, very careful, especially with the people you meet on Instagram. I am blessed to have met JR, and the person we came through did not exactly introduce each other. However, through osmosis, we met, and it's been an amazing collaboration. I have learned so much from him. His podcasts are really eclectic, informational, they're fun. I always point this out to my listeners. I have written reviews for him. He has marketed my podcast. But be careful of others who you say that you will help, and you will help them. You'll put them on your podcast as far as links, and they don't give anything back after 2 or 3 times of doing this. Say bye-bye. With your podcast presentation, I strongly believe you have a visual vocabulary. Use powerful words when you're talking. Even if you're in that interview, use really imagery, words that will create an image in someone's mind, even when you're interviewing. When I was making a presentation at PodFest last year, it was called The Power of Your Words. And I quickly taught that stop using these filler words, am, and so instead use words such as furthermore, in that instance, in any case, however. Those are the words you want to begin your sentence with. The response I had was someone said, well, I talked to a linguist and they said filler words are okay. I said, yes, if you want to be ordinary. But if you want to be extraordinary, learn how to use powerful words. To wrap this up, don't worry about the equipment because you may not last longer than 6 months. That's the average of a podcaster, a new one. Don't worry about the equipment. What is your mission? What will people benefit from when they listen to your podcast? That's really important to create an audience. Lastly, don't ramble. Treat it like a presentation. Have an introduction, have the body, and have the conclusion. Those 3 things will help you be a success, and you'll love what you're doing. The content will come so easy to you when you have mission and a benefit. I'm Valerie Hall. I create the podcast Wealth, Yoga, Wine.
Please follow WV Uncommonplace on Instagram, Tumblr, Twitter, TikTok where we have some great content, Facebook, LinkedIn. Hit up the merch store at onecommonplace.square.site. Join the email list from the website, and rate, subscribe, and give feedback from your favorite podcatcher. And lastly, thanks for listening and tune into the next episode.